Next, we're going to look at some advanced adjustment tools. So first of all, choose the image that you want to adjust in your digital graphic. So I've chosen here a lady in Daisy Field on mine. I've just found that on the internet and put that in for an example of what I mean. So I selected that layer and I'm going to go up to the image at the top here, then choose adjustments, and I'm going to choose levels. So levels basically affect the lights and the darks in your image. So if you have a look at the screen here, we've got these sliders here, which are the input levels, and these sliders here, which are the output levels. This here is the histogram. Okay, histogram is just the name of this particular chart, and it's basically the light and the color info of your particular image. So on the left hand side it signifies how much dark there is, and on the right hand side it signifies how much light there is. And that makes sense because if you look at our image here, you can see there's quite a lot of light within the image. There's not much dark, hence it's heavier at this end of the histogram. So we can edit the input and the output levels. So for example, if I was to click on this slider here, I can move it to the right. If you watch the image at the same time, you can see here what's happening. So all the information to the left of wherever this slider is becomes darker. That's what I'm doing by doing that. Okay, quite a nice effect. And in the same way, when I move this slider on the right, if I move that left, all the information in the image to the right of that goes lighter, hence my picture's going whiter. And it's the same for the midpoint. I can make it lighter or darker by changing it, moving it that way. Okay, so I can get some different effects by doing that. I can also change the output levels. So I could make the black point brighter, so by changing this. So if you look at the image, you see all the dark areas are going lighter. There you go. What you're basically doing is making the black become a lighter grey, as you can see from the output there. And in the same way, you could make the light areas go darker. So it really, again, depends what kind of effect you are after. Now we're going to look at curves, which is basically very similar to levels. So if I go, I'm going to keep on that same layer for the lady in the daisy field, and I'm going to go image, adjustments, and I'm going to choose curves. So it's very similar setup to the levels. It does very similar things. So, but it uses one chart, one histogram for everything. So if I take this point here, okay, and I move it up, look at the image, what's happening is that it's going lighter. Okay, that's the dark point. So I'm making all the dark points lighter. In the same way, I could take this point here, which is the light end, and take it down, and that makes it darker. I can move these points right and left, and that is the same as changing the input on the levels. So if I change that there, for example, you can see the difference that that makes, and do the same over here. Depends what effect you're after, but so far that is basically the same as the levels, but just using one chart to do it. So the key difference between levels and curves is that on curves you can click in the middle here and change the midpoint like you did with the other points here to how you want, and in levels you've got one midpoint. If we just go back to remind ourselves of that, right, we've got just the one midpoint. So the advantage basically is of using curves. is that it allows you more variation and control over your dark and light levels. So you can basically change the contrast a lot more, because what it allows you to do, you haven't just got this middle point here. I could change that. I could then create another point there if I wanted to, and then another one up here, and completely change my image. So curves allow you more variation and control. It's not to say that they're better than levels, it depends what your use is, but do just be aware that if you use more than probably 3 points, it's going to start to look a bit strange, because you start losing a lot of information from your image. But again, it does depend on the effect that you are after. So we've had a look at some of the level and curves adjustments, but let's have a look in a bit more detail about them. So if I keep on my same image here and go to image, adjustments and levels, I can change the black and white points within the image by using this button here. So if I click on this one, this sets the black point. So I choose the black point. So when I click on a colour within my image, anything darker than that will go black. So if I choose her hair, for example, anything darker than that goes black. So all the pigments in it that are darker really just stand out as black. Okay. If I was to choose something really light using the black point, most of the image is going to turn black like that. Okay, now let's try that using the white point here. And it does exactly the same, but the opposite. So if I choose a white area here, not much is going to change, because basically anything that is lighter than that will go whiter. But of course I've chosen a white image, so white part of the image, so not much will change. If I choose a dark part, okay, a lot is going to change, because a lot of it was already dark, so therefore it's going to make everything lighter. So you can get some really cool effects doing that, but you have to be careful how you use it, again, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So the same tools are available to me in the curves. So I'm just going to cancel that and show you image, adjustment, curves. Okay. And I've got the same tools there that I could adjust that way. I can also create some really cool effects if I wanted to change the curves. This is something I can't do in the levels. So if I wanted to, I could use this pencil tool here to draw on my histogram where I want the levels of the dark and the light to be. So if you have a look at the image while I'm drawing, look, if I just did this, for example, okay, get some really amazing effects in different colours. So I could do lots of different things. I could also do this by using this tool here. So let me just go back in and show you that. So I can use this tool instead of the pencil, for example, and I can actually decide on the tonal range of my image to change. So this is not changing just this piece of grass, it's to do with the tones in the image. So say, for example, this one, you can see, if you have a look over here, when I'm moving my mouse here, if I'm going white, that's at the right hand side of the histogram, because it's the lightest area. So if I wanted to change the lightest areas, I could choose that colour picker there and change that so that all the lightest areas, for example, went slightly darker. I could click over here and you can see, again, I'm changing the curves through changing where my mouse is and the different parts of the image. So there's lots of different ways in which I can alter how the image looks. And I think curves, personally, I prefer working with curves. But again, it depends on the type of effect you're trying to achieve for your digital graphic. There's no point in doing it for the sake of it. It's also worth bearing in mind that you can use the adjustments not just for the image. So to do it on an image, we know already you select the correct image from the layers panel. But if you wanted to change everything in your digital graphic and alter all the levels or curves, what you do is use this adjustment tool down here that we've used before and make sure it is above the top layer. Or, for example, if you wanted to only affect these, you do it above this one. So it's kind of like the tools when we used before. Depending on where you put your adjustment layer depends on what it affects. Anything underneath it in the layers panel will be affected. So if I put that on the top there and press this button here and press curves, for example, it might appear here, but that's okay. If I can't see it, I can literally click and drag out to this toolbar here, click on it, and it will pop out. And it's exactly the same as the one we were using for the individual image. I can do anything I like, but it will affect everything on here. So for example, I can do that, and you can see absolutely everything in my digital graphic is changing. But again, if you were going to do this, you'd need to be able to justify why you were doing it, not just for the sake of using a different tool. So that is Advanced Adjustment Tools.